When God marks a date on heaven's calendar, everything in your life begins to shift, seen and unseen. December 6th and 7th, 2025 are not ordinary days. They are divine appointments, pre-written moments where God has determined that cycles will break, doors will open, and supernatural acceleration will collide with your destiny. There are seasons where God whispers, but there are also seasons where God thunders, and this is one of those seasons. Something is already moving in the atmosphere. Something is already aligning on your behalf. Something is already responding to your obedience, your faith, your prayer, and your expectation. The realm of the Spirit is pregnant with possibility, and heaven has issued a decree that these days will be days of change, breakthrough, visitation, and divine reversal. You're not stepping into a date on a calendar. You are stepping into a prophetic moment tailor-made for your elevation. And as you hear this prayer, even a single time, the frequency of faith will resonate with the frequency of heaven, causing financial miracles to locate you, pursue you, and overtake you. You are entering a moment where God rewrites the script, resets the atmosphere, and releases resources that were previously held back. What was delayed is being delivered, what was stagnant is being stirred, and what was locked is being unlocked. This is the hour where God says, prepare yourself, because everything is about to shift in your favor. When God marks specific dates in the spiritual realm, those days become portals of transformation and divine visitation, and December 6 and 7 carry that kind of prophetic weight for you. These are not random moments. These are appointments heaven scheduled long before you ever faced the challenges, limitations, or financial setbacks that tried to define you. When God says everything will change on those days, it means that the shift is not limited to your bank account. It is a total realignment of your spiritual posture, your mental framework, your relationships, your opportunities, and the flow of resources assigned to your destiny. God is signaling that the cycle you have been trapped in is coming to an end, and a new cycle of breakthrough is beginning. Heaven has already prepared the release. Now all creation is waiting for your agreement with what God has declared. These days will carry the weight of divine reversal, where what was working against you begins working for you. Those who overlooked you will suddenly recognize your value. Resources that were blocked will be redirected into your hands. Doors that refuse to open will swing wide because God Himself has. A financial miracle is never the result of effort alone. And this is the revelation many people miss when they chase provision without seeking alignment. There are moments in life where your labor reaches its limit, where your strategy has no more power, and where your intellect cannot produce the breakthrough you need. It is in those moments that God reveals a deeper truth. Supernatural supply is governed by spiritual positioning. When God prepares to release a financial miracle, He begins by aligning your spirit, your thoughts, your expectations, and your environment with what heaven has already decided to give you. This alignment becomes a magnet for resources. It draws what belongs to you out of the unseen realm and pulls it into manifestation. When you step into divine alignment, you stop working against yourself and begin moving with the current of God's purposes. Suddenly, what was difficult becomes effortless, what was delayed becomes accelerated, and what was stagnant begins to flow. This alignment is not passive, it is intentional. It requires the recalibration of your beliefs, because financial miracles cannot flow where doubt dominates. It requires the restructuring of your inner life, because abundance cannot dwell where fear has built strongholds. Divine alignment asks you to release what drains you, detach from what distracts you, and embrace what elevates you. It pulls you out of cycles that sabotage your success and ushers you into environments that nurture your faith. When you align with heaven, you become synchronized with divine timing, and divine timing always carries provision. Heaven is never empty, heaven is never late. Heaven is never confused. The moment you come into agreement with what heaven has spoken, the supply already waiting for you begins to locate you. Financial miracles are not random acts of generosity from God. They are responses to your spiritual frequency. When your spirit and your actions match the promise God has already released, the miracle becomes inevitable. This is why some people can hear a prayer one time and something shifts instantly. The prayer aligns their heart, their atmosphere, and their expectation. That alignment becomes a spiritual signal that triggers movement in the unseen realm. It awakens connections, activates helpers, influences decisions, and rearranges circumstances in your favor. Alignment prepares you to receive without fear, steward without waste, and multiply without limitation. It breaks the internal resistance that keeps blessings from settling and creates the capacity for financial overflow. When your spirit is aligned, money no longer controls you, you govern it. When your mind is aligned, you no longer sabotage opportunities, you recognize them. When your faith is aligned, you no longer question if God can do it, you expect Him to do it. Alignment draws the miracle closer, prepares the vessel, and pulls you into the flow of supernatural provision. Hearing the right prayer is not just a spiritual experience, it is a catalytic force that initiates movement in the unseen realm. There are prayers that comfort, prayers that instruct, and then there are prayers that activate something on the inside of you and around you. A financial miracle is not only birthed through asking, but through absorbing the frequency of a prayer that carries divine authority. When you hear a prayer that is aligned with heaven's intentions for your life, something in your spirit begins to resonate, almost like a tuning fork that vibrates when it encounters the right sound. That resonance is the beginning of supernatural acceleration. It shifts your internal atmosphere before it shifts your external circumstances, because acceleration always begins in the spirit. As your spirit rises, your mind expands, your faith increases, and your environment starts adjusting itself to match what God is releasing through that prayer. The right prayer disrupts fear, dismantles lack-based thinking, and uproots the mindset that has kept you bound to limitation. It infuses your soul with divine possibility. It exposes you to a new level of expectation where you can finally see yourself receiving what once felt distant or impossible. This type of prayer does not just make you feel better, it reconfigures the blueprint of your destiny. It awakens dormant faith, activates spiritual laws, and releases a divine push that accelerates everything assigned to you. When acceleration begins, delays lose their power. The barriers that once slowed your progress become irrelevant. The timeline that seemed stuck suddenly shifts. Doors that were sealed begin to open. Opportunities begin to multiply, and financial streams that were blocked begin to flow. A single prayer can break cycles that years of effort could not break. It can expose you to strategies and ideas that were previously hidden. It can put you on the radar of people who are assigned to bless, fund, or support you. The right prayer becomes a divine signal that alerts the spiritual realm that you are ready for movement. It announces your faith to heaven and announces your shift to the earth. It attracts what belongs to you and repels what drains you. It awakens the angels assigned to your financial destiny and causes them to move swiftly on your behalf. Divine acceleration means harvest comes quicker, breakthrough comes easier, and provision comes in ways that surpass your logic. The right prayer pulls you into God's pace, and God's pace is never slow. God's pace is intentional, strategic, and unstoppable. When you hear a prayer that carries divine authority, you step into a flow where miracles become natural, increase becomes expected, and acceleration becomes your new normal. When God decides to change cycles, patterns, and timelines in your life, He does it in a way that no human effort could orchestrate. There are moments when heaven interrupts your normal rhythm and introduces a new divine sequence that overrides everything that has previously limited you. A cycle is a repeated pattern, a loop that keeps producing the same outcomes no matter how hard you try to shift them on your own. But when God steps in, He doesn't just modify the cycle, He breaks it. He dismantles the invisible structures that kept you trapped in delay, lack, and stagnation. He reaches into the unseen realm where the real battles are fought and changes the spiritual architecture that governs your life. Patterns you inherited, patterns you learned, and patterns you didn't even realize you were repeating begin to crumble under the weight of His intervention. When God declares that a moment has arrived for change, time itself begins to bow to His word. What would normally take months can happen in days, and what should have taken years can manifest in a moment. Heaven does not operate according to human calendars, but according to divine intention. And when divine intention collides with your obedience, time becomes a servant to your destiny rather than a barrier to it. God rearranges sequences, accelerates processes, and redeems time that was lost. He pulls you out of the past and positions you into a future that was waiting for your alignment. You begin to notice that situations that once drained you no longer have access to your emotions. Relationships that kept you stuck begin to fade. Opportunities that were locked begin to open. Your perspective shifts, your decisions elevate, and your environment responds. This is what happens when God initiates a new cycle. Everything connected to you becomes subject to transformation. Old fears lose their grip because God is writing a new narrative. Old limitations fall away because God has released new capacity. Old battles end because God has established new victories. When God adjusts timelines, the trajectory of your life bends toward destiny with supernatural force. Delays collapse, detours end, and divine momentum takes over. You find yourself in rooms you didn't expect, conversations you didn't orchestrate, and opportunities you couldn't have created on your own. The shift God initiates is not subtle, it is undeniable. It is a recalibration that touches every dimension of your life, financially, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and relationally. You begin to operate from a place of clarity and confidence because the old cycle has lost its authority. Where there was confusion, there is now direction. Where there was lack, there is now provision. Where there was waiting, there is now movement. When God changes cycles, patterns, and timelines, He releases you into a season where the impossible becomes attainable and the improbable becomes expected. Expectation is one of the most powerful spiritual forces you possess, and when it is activated, it becomes a magnet for divine resources. What you expect begins to shape what you attract, because expectation is not merely a feeling, it is a spiritual posture. It signals to heaven that you are ready to receive what God has already prepared. Many people pray for financial miracles, but remain internally positioned for lack, fear, or disappointment. Expectation breaks that internal conflict and shifts you into a state where your faith and your belief align with God's promises. When expectation rises, it silences the voice of doubt and dismantles the fear that tries to keep you in cycles of scarcity. It creates a spiritual vibration that reaches into the unseen realm and pulls into your reality what heaven has already released. Expectation causes opportunities to locate you, favor to find you, and provision to be drawn toward you. It is the invisible thread that ties your present to your future manifestation. When God sees expectation in your heart, He begins orchestrating divine appointments, shifting conversations, and opening doors that were once closed. Expectation moves you from passively waiting to actively preparing. You begin to make decisions aligned with abundance rather than survival. You start managing your time, your thoughts, and your energy differently because you are making room for what you know is coming. This internal expansion creates external capacity, and external capacity becomes the landing place for supernatural provision. Expectation changes the way you pray because you are no longer begging for breakthrough, you are thanking God for what is already on its way. It changes the way you think because you no longer see obstacles as threats, but as setups for God to demonstrate His power. It changes the way you walk because faith gives you a new rhythm, a new boldness, a new authority. When your expectation shifts, your atmosphere shifts with it. People respond to you differently. Opportunities open that weren't available before. Ideas begin to flow. Creativity comes alive. Solutions appear where there once were only problems. This is the power of expectation. It activates the supernatural and invites God to exceed your natural limitations. Expectation also repels what is not aligned with your destiny. It pushes away distractions, delays, and people who do not carry the grace to walk with you into your next season. It protects your focus because you understand that what you carry is too significant to waste energy on anything that does not move you forward. Expectation attracts provision because heaven responds to hungry faith. It is the spiritual signal that tells God you are ready, positioned, open, and available for the next dimension of blessing. When expectation fills your spirit, you begin to draw in resources, connections, and opportunities that were divinely designed for your elevation. The atmosphere of faith is not just a spiritual concept, it is an environment charged with divine possibility, and when you step into it, everything around you begins to respond. Faith creates a climate where miracles become natural and provision becomes expected. When your faith rises, it sends a signal into the spiritual realm that you are ready to receive what God has already ordained. This signal draws what has been withheld, delayed, or blocked. It becomes a magnetic force that pulls financial miracles, open doors, divine connections, and supernatural ideas toward you. Faith is not passive, it is active, alive, and always producing movement. When you cultivate an atmosphere of faith, you shift out of survival mode and into supernatural flow. Fear no longer has authority because faith becomes the dominant frequency in your life. Doubt can no longer sabotage you because your spirit is anchored in what God has spoken rather than what you see. An atmosphere of faith is created through your words, your thoughts, your worship, and your alignment with God's promises. It is shaped by what you allow into your mind and what you tolerate in your environment. As your faith increases, the atmosphere around you begins to shift. You notice that negative voices lose their influence, discouragement loses its weight, and distractions lose their pull. Faith sharpens your focus and awakens your spiritual senses so you can recognize divine opportunities disguised as ordinary moments. It positions you to discern what is from God and what is not. This discernment protects your destiny because financial miracles often require you to move swiftly when God opens a door. When your atmosphere is filled with faith, hesitation is replaced by boldness. You are no longer intimidated by big opportunities or overwhelmed by unexpected blessings because your faith has already prepared you to handle what is coming. Faith draws divine resources because heaven responds to belief. Angels move on behalf of those who operate in faith. Strategies begin to unfold. Favor begins to increase. The right people begin to appear at the right time. Faith sets miracles in motion by aligning you with God's supernatural timeline. It accelerates what was stagnant, unlocks what was closed, and multiplies what was little. A faith-filled atmosphere also changes you internally. It strengthens your identity, enlarges your vision, and stretches your capacity. It teaches you to think like someone who carries abundance rather than someone who fears lack. It shifts your language from limitation to possibility, from struggle to expectation, from waiting to receiving. When the atmosphere around you is saturated with faith, you become a magnet for breakthrough. Resources seek you out. Opportunities pursue you. blessings attach themselves to you. Faith creates a spiritual climate where nothing is impossible and everything God promised becomes accessible.